So there's a lot of young folks, undergrads, grads, they're also young, listen to this. So is there, you've talked about a lot of fascinating stuff that's like there's ways that things are done and there's actual solutions and they're not always like intersecting. Do you have advice for undergraduate students or graduate students or even people in high school now about a life, about career, of how they might be able to solve real big problems in the world, how they should live their life in order to have a chance to solve big problems in the world?
It's hard. I struggle a little bit sometimes to give advice because the advice that I give from my own personal experience is necessarily distinct from the advice that would make other people successful. I have unending ambitions to make things better, I suppose, and I don't see barricades where other people sometimes see barricades. Even just little things like when this virus started. I'm a medical director at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and so I oversee or help to oversee molecular virology diagnostics. So when this virus started, wearing my epidemiology hat and wearing my sort of viral outbreak hat, I recognized that this was going to be a big virus that was important at a global level. Even if the CDC and WHO weren't ready to admit that it was a pandemic, it was obvious in January that it was a pandemic. So I started trying to get a test built at the Brigham, which is one of Harvard's teaching hospitals. The first encounters I had with the upper administration of the hospital were pretty much, no, why would we do that? That's silly. Who are you? And I said, well, okay, don't believe me, sure. But I kept pushing on it. And then eventually I got them to agree. It was really only a couple of weeks before the Biogen conference happened. We started building the test. I think they started looking abroad and saying, okay, this is happening, sure. Like, maybe he was right. But then I went a step further and I said, we're not going to have enough tests at the hospital. And so my ambition was to get a better testing program started. And so I figured what better place to scale up testing than the Broad Institute. Broad Institute is amazing, very high throughput, high efficiency research institute that does a lot of genomic sequencing, things like that. So I went to the Broad and I said, hey, there's this coronavirus that's obviously going to impact our society greatly. Can we start modifying your high efficiency instruments and robots for coronavirus testing? Everyone in my orbit in the hospital world just said, that's ridiculous. How could you possibly plan to do that? It's impossible. And to me, it was like the most dead simple thing to do.
Right.
But the higher ups and the people who think about, I think one of the most important things is to recognize that most people in the world don't see solutions. They just see problems. And it's because it's an easy thing to do. Thinking of problems and how things will go wrong is really easy because you're not coming up with a brand new solution. And this to me was just a super simple solution. Hey, let's get the Broad to help build tests. Every single hospital director, told me no, like it's impossible. My own superiors, the ones I report to in the hospital, said, Mike, you're a new faculty member. Your ideas, probably would be right, but you're too naive and young to know that it's impossible.
Right.
Obviously now the Broad is the highest throughput laboratory in the country, and
Yes.
and so I think my recommendation to people is, as much as possible, get out of the mode of thinking about things as problems. Sometimes you piss people off. I could probably use a better filter sometimes to try to be not so upfront with certain things, but it's just so crucial to always just bring it, think about things in new ways that other people haven't, because usually there's something else out there. And one of the things that has been most beneficial to me, which is that my education was really broad. It was engineering and physics, and and then I became a Buddhist monk for a while, and so that gave me a different perspective. But then it was medicine and immunology, and now I've brought all of it together from a mathematics and biology and medicine perspective, and policy and public health. And I think that I'm not the best in any one of these things. I recognize that there are going to be geniuses out there who are just worlds better than me at any one of these things that I try to work on. But my superpower is bringing them all together, and just thinking. And that's, I think, how you can really change the world. I don't know that I'll ever change the world in the way that I hope.
But that's how you can
But
have a chance.
yeah, that's how you can have a chance. Exactly. And I think it's also what, this to me, this rapid testing program, like this is the most dead simple solution in the world.
And this literally could change the world,
It
actually.
could change the world. It could change, and it is. There's countries that are doing it now. The U.S. isn't, but I've been advising many countries on it, and I would say that, some of the early papers that we put out earlier on, a lot of the things actually are changing. You don't always, unless you really look hard, you don't know where you're actually having an effect. Sometimes it's more overt than other times. In April, I published a paper that was saying, hey, with the PCR values from these tests, we need to really focus on the CT values, the actual quantitative values of these lab-based PCR tests. At the time, all the physicians and laboratory directors told me that was stupid. Why would you do that? They're not accurate enough. And of course, now it's headline news that, Florida, they just mandated reporting out the CT values of these tests because there's a real utility of them. You can understand public health from it. You can understand better clinical management. That was a simple solution to a pretty difficult problem. And it is changing the way that we approach all of the lab testing in this country. It's taken a few months, but it's starting to change because of that. And, that was just me saying, hey, this is something we should be focusing on. Got some other people involved and other people. And now people recognize, hey, there's actual value in this number that comes out of these lab-based PCR tests. So sometimes it does grow fairly quickly. But I think the real answer, my only answer, I don't know what, I recognize that some people are going to be really focused on and have one small but deep skill set. I go the opposite direction. I try to bring things together. And but the biggest thing I think is just don't see barriers. Like just see, like there's always a solution to a barrier. If there's a barrier, that literally means there's a solution to it. That's why it's called a barrier.
And just like you said, most people will just present to you, only be thinking about it and present to you with barriers. And so it's easy to start thinking that's all there is in this world.
Yeah. And just think big. I mean, God, there's nothing wrong with thinking big. Elon Musk thought big and then thinking big builds on itself. You get $1 billion from one big idea, and then that allows you to make 3 new big ideas.
And there's a hunger for it. If you think big and you communicate that vision with the world, all the most brilliant and like passionate people will just you'll attract them and they'll come to you. And then it makes your life actually really exciting. The people I've met at like Tesla and Neuralink, I mean, there's just like this fire in their eyes. They just love life. And it's amazing, I think, to be around those people.